بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق البارئ المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرزاق الفتاح العليم القابض الباسط الخافض الرافع المعز المذل السميع البصير.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلووا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا.
You cannot assume that Muslims that live in a society where Islam is constantly being bashed, not even a society, a world where Islam is constantly being bashed, will not have an effect, some residual effects on them also. It will. It has an effect on us. It impacts us. So our youth have already like a little bit contamination in their views of Islam, because they're mixed in with what others say about Islam and what they've come to learn themselves from the deen of themselves. And a lot of times the real foundation isn't there to begin with. Then they go to college. And when they go to college, they already felt bad about looking Muslim, being weird, being different, being the guy that's being criticized all the time. And then they end up in philosophy 101. And they end up in anthropology 101. And they end up in Middle Eastern studies 101. And you know what happens in those courses, right? You know what happens in those college courses? Basically now this youth, let me tell you what's going on. This youth who felt bad about Islam this whole time, they didn't feel confident in the faith to begin with, and it was something they were almost embarrassed about. Now they have some philosophical arguments in their hands that justifies, well, yeah, I'm not that interested in Islam anymore because, how do we really know if God exists? I took a course about whether God exists or not, and there are all these arguments. But the real problem isn't that they have new philosophical arguments. The real problem is they never had a real love and conviction and loyalty to Islam to begin with. These courses only made it easy for you to make an excuse. Hide behind the facade of an intellectual excuse. That's all it is. But they're being equipped with those excuses. We haven't equipped our own youth intellectually. Our Islamic schools should not be there to protect children from the world of kufr. Our Islamic schools are supposed to be, this is what you're going to find them saying about Allah's deen, and this is how we respond. So when you go out there, you're not there to answer their questions. You become the people that follow the nation of Ibrahim alayhi salam. He's not asked questions, he's the one asking the questions. He's not shaken about his faith, he makes other people shaken about their false beliefs. It's the other way around. Our entire approach to Islamic education has become entirely defensive. There's too much fitna out there. We need to shield our children and hide them from what's going on outside. I fear for them when they go to college. No, everybody else should fear when the Muslim goes to college. It should be the other way around. We should be the carriers of confidence. That's what it should be. It needs an entire rethinking on our part on how Islamic education is conducted.
Hi, my name is Mike Bachman, and I'm a United Methodist pastor. And I'm excited that we're able to share in a little question and answer time with Imam Omar Suleiman. He's here to answer questions from some folks who have been part of our audience as we've been having an extended conversation together. So I'll introduce them each, and I'm looking forward to hearing their questions and the response that Imam Omar has. And now we have Kelly from our audience here who has a question for Imam Omar.
Hi, I'm kind of cheating here because I'm going to hope that you'll fight some battles that I've been fighting within, unfortunately, my own family. So one of my best friends in the whole world is Muslim and was my maid of honor in my wedding many, many, many years ago. And we're still very, very close, which is why I'm here today.
Great.
So first I want to know, can I wear the hijab without being disrespectful?
Of course you can. Yeah, sure.
Okay, and what is the meaning of that? First of all, I just want to do it so I don't have to do my hair every day, but
well, one of the hijabis that we have here, but so it's, and that's part of the beauty of America, is that these expressions of solidarity that we've had as well. Just wonderful people, and that's something that we feed off of, and that's something that we as a community, we draw from that positive energy, that, you know, there are people that are willing to even stand in solidarity. The poor Sikh community, they've been attacked because they look Muslim, over and over and over again. So they're being attacked for being Muslim even though they're not Muslim. So it's wonderful to see solidarity, and certainly you won't be disrespectful to us. And I think it's wonderful to have people like you that are
well, I just didn't know if it would be taken as a, you know, not making fun of them or making light of it, because I think it's a very intimate decision that the women make.
Just know to say wa alaikum assalam when someone says assalamu alaikum to them. You'll be good. That's
everything Miriam has taught me, I'm mutilated. So slanikum and all those guys, I can't do it. So. Okay, so what I did when this came about was I asked the member of my family that argues with me repetitively about these issues. It saddens me, some of the belief system that my own family members have. And so I'd like for you to answer the questions that I asked them to write. And I said, give me your best. Give me everything you got, because...
All right, here we go.
Because, and I said if it's disrespectful, I won't ask it. But
no, you can ask anything.
Okay, so here we go.
It's fine.
And I won't tell you who it is.
You got a whole
4 hours into question, and now you get the real hard ones.
Okay, so this is, again, these are not my questions.
I understand. It's not you.
Okay, but I do have one for you at the end.
Okay.
Why won't the Muslim community stand up as Americans and speak out clearly against ISIS? I don't accept that they are afraid, because we are all afraid, and they're attacking us, not the Muslims.
Okay. All right, so number one, every single mosque in this country, the sermon on that Friday after San Bernardino was a condemnation of terrorism. We've condemned. We've condemned more than we've read Qur'an lately. All right, it's been I condemn, and someone was even suggesting we have an app called I Condemn, so we can just press a button every time something happens, and Muslims can say I condemn. Number one, there's an implicit racism sometimes in those questions, right? Because do we ask, when Dylan Roof murdered those people in that church, when a white supremacist carries out murder, do we ask all white Americans in the country to stand up and condemn that? When any other faith group has a lunatic that comes out, when someone blows up an abortion clinic in the name of Christianity, do we ask all Christians to condemn? And why aren't we hearing you condemn, you know, that person that blew up the abortion clinic? So there's almost an implied guilt, collective guilt, and we have to reject that collective guilt. I'm not responsible for, I'm just as hurt as anybody else when an attack takes place. Muslims died on 9/11. Muslims died on 9/11. Hundreds of Muslims died on 9/11. Not just a few, hundreds of them. There were Muslim firefighters on 9/11. So that's number one. We reject the collective guilt. We do condemn. We condemn not because we believe that we're guilty. We condemn, number one, to distance ourselves. Number two, to show our congregation, you know, to just place that path forward, to pave that path that, okay, you know, this is not part of Islam, and this is why it's not part of Islam. However, the media chooses what to cover and what not to cover. We reach out to the media all the time. But the types of guests that are brought on these media outlets are often, not representative of our Muslim community. And when we do have someone that's put on these news channels eventually from our community, before they can even ask a question, they're asked questions like, do you support Hamas? Like, they're immediately put on the hot seat, and their entire public life is put on display. So people don't want to deal with that nonsense, right? So we do condemn, we do stand up against that bigotry, and we stand up against that terrorism and all violence, in fact. But we've condemned ourselves out. So that's one. As far as the second part of that question, which is we're being attacked, not Muslims, the biggest victims, most of the victims of ISIS are Muslims. Mm-hmm. And Muslims hate ISIS probably more than, even non-American Muslims hate ISIS more than most Americans do probably. So Muslims are the greatest victims of ISIS. And actually, the journalists that were being massacred and things of that sort, there are a lot of Muslim journalists that were being massacred too. So that doesn't take away from the tragedy of losing American journalists and things of that sort. But what about the hundreds of Syrian journalists and Iraqi journalists that were beheaded as well by ISIS? So we're fighting this cancer as well. I often tell people the irony of my situation. I've had death threats from ISIS, and I've also been threatened by Islamophobes. So I've been attacked online. I actually have screenshots and emails and things of that sort from ISIS threatening to kill me for speaking out against them, and then I've been threatened by Islamophobes for secretly belonging to ISIS and for sympathizing with ISIS and for being a closet Islamist and so on and so forth. So the extremists will always speak in a synchronized fashion, but we have to reject it altogether.
Okay. How can you tell the good ones from the bad ones? Because they are now being trained to shave and wear crosses and act very American to fool the public.
Okay.
And this is what I fight on a regular basis. I'm just saying.
And I applaud you for bringing those questions forward, right? I mean,
it's tough.
Yeah. I guess the good ones have beards, or I'm not sure.
Well, I say, how can I tell any good person from any bad person?
Absolutely.
And I tell my children, the boogeyman doesn't look like a boogeyman.
Sure.
So that's how I answer it. But
how do you tell
the way
that how do you tell a potential supremacist or a potential mass school shooter, from a normal person that's not going to shoot up an elementary school, right? So I think that again, it's the implied racism and the boogeyman effect. And even if you watch these different movies, there was a movie that came out recently about the soldier in Iraq. I forgot what the name was. Was it? No, not 13 Hours Benghazi. The soldier, American Sniper. Right. And I think the only Muslim that appeared to be good in the movie turned out to be evil as well, right? So this idea of that kind Muslim, the cab driver, the neighbor, that sweet Muslim is really, plotting to kill you, and they're practicing taqiyya and they're hiding their faith and these types of things. So you can't beat that. That's not something that we can do. We just can't beat that.
So what I say is I would rather die with love than live with hate.
Beautiful.
So that's the
Beautiful. I think that's
Amen.
A beautiful answer. Yeah.
Amen.
So
I wish more people were like you.
The rest of the questions are kind of along that line, so I think we're good. But I would like to know, and this is something that Miriam gave me an article. It was wonderful. What can we actually do? Because it is infuriating to me to hear stories that she tells me, and knowing how much I love her and her family and the folks that she in her community. It's infuriating to not know what to do. What can we actually do?
We can continue to encourage dialogue and engagement and continue to respond to the negativity with more positive things. I think efforts like this, I think service projects, I think initiatives, I think open mosques and open churches and synagogues and interfaith dialogues, people coming together and people using whatever they have. Don't ever belittle your position. To fight one person's hatred and stereotype is a noble job in and of itself. So don't ever belittle your capacity, what's been given to you. You don't, even if you're not speaking to 1 million people, if you're speaking to one, that's good enough. So everyone in their own right and in their own capacity, just fighting that negativity. I think that's, hopefully those voices will come together. And I do believe that we're moving towards a more tolerant America. I think that the younger generation is by and large far more tolerant and accepting, and of a more diverse America. So I think we'll be okay.
Well, that's good to know.
Thank you. Thank
you.
you so much.
Thanks. Well, that wraps our time of asking questions with Imam Omar Suleiman. I want to thank you for the opportunity for me and for folks here to ask questions. I want to thank the people who showed up today to hear the interview, and then to bring your own questions, whether they're from yourself, whether they're from family members and others. The more opportunities we have to ask questions, the more opportunities we have for dialogue, the better off we'll all be. And so I'm grateful for this time together. I'm grateful for all the folks that you see here and all the folks behind the scenes that are working to make this possible. This makes our country better. It makes our culture better. And I'm grateful for opportunities like this. Have a great day.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Today I'd like to give a gentle reminder of women's rights in Islam. We live in an age of Islamophobia, and the media loves to demonize Islam wherever the opportunity arises, and the topic of women is a favorite. The media focuses on women through a cultural lens and labels offensive practices as being Islamic, when it has nothing to do with Islam. The rights of women in Islam are actually very progressive. It is important to know the toxic impact cultures can have on women's rights, whether these cultures be Eastern or Western. With Islam came an era where women were recognized as important, valued and respected members of society. Let us see how this was achieved through Islam ahead of its time. Number 1. As a daughter. The Prophet ﷺ said, "He who raises 2 daughters until maturity will be with me in paradise," and this is according to Sahih Muslim. What an honour! Such thinking came from Islam in 6th century Arabia, and was even more progressive as it was a time when baby girls were frowned upon and even buried alive. Islam promptly put a stop to this horrendous practice. As a wife, the Qur'an states, husbands should take good care of their wives. Surah Nisa, ayah 34. Allah has opened this ayah by explaining what a husband needs to be doing for his wife first and foremost, and that is taking care of her. When a man marries a woman, he takes her from her father and promises to take care of her well. He needs to be taking care of her, not be an authoritarian, as most cultures seem to confuse it with. There is no mention of male privilege or superiority here or anywhere else in the Qur'an. In certain cultures, people live in extended family situations where the wife is asked to move in with the rest of her husband's family. This works for some couples but not others. The point is, this is not Islam, so not compulsory, although it is often enforced as such. A wife is entitled to her own private place of dwelling according to Islam. Upon marriage, although we should love and respect each other's families, inasmuch as we do any other Muslims, the in-laws themselves actually have no rights on the woman and should not harbour expectations of the wife. Sadly, in some cultures still, the wife is expected to cook, clean and serve everyone in the household like a maid. Commonly, the mother-in-law may have issues with her son's wife. However, she does not have a right to oppress his wife. If this happens, the husband should, using gentleness, explain to his mother that if she has issues, she can take them up with him, but not his wife. Finally, both husband and wife have responsibilities towards their own parents respectively. Once a woman marries, her duties and rights remain to her parents and do not stop just because she is married. I would like to mention here an important note, that no one Muslim can use his or her rights to take the rights of another Muslim, and so everyone's rights should be honoured. 3. As a mother. The honour Islam gives to a mother is far beyond that of any other culture to date. It recognises the struggles a woman goes through in labour, birth and child rearing. It recognizes the role of a mother and offers the highest of rewards. Paradise lies at the feet of your mother, according to Sahih Muslim. Breastfeeding in Islam is encouraged, and again, a mother who is nursing is seen in high esteem and should be well looked after by her spouse. Islam was very forward-thinking with regards to the rights of a nursing mother. It proposed that the father provides moral support and encouragement, that the father must provide the means to feed and clothe the nursing mother, and if the nursing mother cannot breastfeed, then the father needs to provide an alternative. Finally, the breastfeeding mother should really be compensated for her breastfeeding in kind. 4. Women and education. The first words of the Qur'an revealed to the Prophet ﷺ were, "Read in the name of your Lord who created." Surah Alaq, Ayah 1. Thus, pursuit of knowledge is strongly recommended for men and women alike. So seeking an education is a right of our daughters. Aisha radiallahu an, a wife of the Prophet ﷺ, was a great scholar of the Deen. 5. Women and finances. Inheritance prior to Islam was only something that men were entitled to, and in fact women were often seen as an extension of property to be inherited. Islam gave women a share of inheritance. Although her share is smaller than that of the man's, hers is for her alone, whereas a man's share of inheritance is to be distributed amongst his family members. Furthermore, even if a woman is very wealthy, her wealth is hers alone. If she chooses to share her wealth for the sake of Allah, then that is up to her. There is no compulsion, however. That responsibility rests upon the shoulders of the man, and in his case is compulsory.
Welcome to Let the Qur'an Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. Today, as part of our series on controversial issues related to women, let's explore the topic of marriage in Islam. Is the relationship within a Muslim marriage similar to modern concepts of equality of the sexes, or are women disadvantaged in such relationships? Is there a need for Muslims to rethink some of the patriarchal elements that survive in their marriages? Let's sit down and get right into this controversial yet important discussion with Dr. Safiyah Ally. Welcome to the show, Dr. Safiyah.
Pleasure to be on.
So when we started our series on controversial issues related to women, we talked about, that Islam looks at women in a positive light. We talked about the need for ijtihad, like critical thinking. Do you think that's needed in the area of marriage?
Yes, definitely. When we spoke about the positive features, we saw that Islam actually, at the time of the Quranic revelation, made great advances in the rights of women and the way in which women were viewed. But of course, the rest of the world continued to advance beyond that. And what has happened with Islamic law is that Islamic law tended to freeze with that moment in time of the first revelation, as if the whole world is going to stand still. And everything that was said in the Quran is going to apply exactly the way it was applied and understood at the time. And because the rest of the world continued to progress and develop, and we did not allow the child of Islam to grow, Islam as a child to grow and develop and be on par with the rest of the world, this is why we're finding a great dichotomy between the way in which Muslims perceive Islam today, generally with classical roots, and the way in which the world runs. And the solution for this dichotomy is for Muslim scholars to apply the principle of ijtihad, of sound reasoning, going back to our sources, but showing how they might apply to a modern context. If Muslim scholars were to do that, then obviously we would not have this kind of dichotomy. We would be living Islam with the original principles, but applied in a new and different context.
So within that framing of the conversation, do you think that men and women are equal in a marriage from an Islamic perspective? In the classical view, no. And we have to be clear about this because Muslims will imagine that what we are thinking today must be Islam, and that must have always been what Islam was thought to be. But the classical Muslim scholars did not think that women had an equal status.
in the marriage. They thought that the woman was actually somewhat inferior, and the man had a lot of rights over the women.
So are you bringing that perspective? Are you saying that it wasn't equal because of what Qur'an said about women at the time, or because of the interpretation, or like where is that perspective coming from?
It's actually both, because some of what the Quran says obviously reflects the conditions and circumstances at the time. The past societies were largely patriarchal. Women had few rights, if any. And the Quran, in dealing with that society and situation and giving laws on how to improve the situation, could not overturn everything overnight. Even though God is revealing the Quran, but if God wants to work within the natural processes, then even here, God will have to go slowly here, because if you're dealing with an egg, you have to treat it gently, lest you crack or break it. So in giving laws, God had to apply wisdom in giving the laws that could actually make some practical difference at the time. And the classical case of this is the issue of slavery, which is not unrelated to the condition of women, but thinking about slavery, why wasn't slavery abolished in the Quran from day one in a simple declaration from God? The answer from Muslim scholars is that would not have been practical. You have to change the entire economic system to make it possible for slaves once released to have a reasonable income. So certain circumstances have to be accepted as they are, and you can only deal with them by gradual incremental change, not by a total revolution all at once. And indeed, we can see that in the rest of the world, slavery took a while to be abolished, several centuries after the initial revelation of the Islamic message in the form of the Quran. And what has happened in Muslim societies is that Muslim scholars tended to resist the abolition of slavery because they thought that this is un-Quranic, because the Quran didn't actually say so. Now we have a parallel feature happening with, or phenomenon happening with the rights of women. The rights of women has advanced as the human rights in general that led to the abolishment of slavery. And Muslim scholars have tended to resist the advancement of women's rights because, again, they're thinking it's not Quranic, the Quran didn't actually say so. And to add to this, the modern Western societies have gone further in not only advancing the individual rights, but throwing away what they would regard as the yoke of divine revelation and law. And so they promote a kind of liberal way of life that includes sexual promiscuity. To them, it's no longer something shameful or sinful or even objectionable in some cases. So Muslim scholars looking at that, and not only Muslim scholars, but Muslims generally may be thinking, look, we can't go the way of the modern Western society because altogether with the advancement of women's rights, look what they have done to society. The woman has become not only liberated, but she's actually in a reverse way, at least for some women, they have become enslaved to the passions of men and to the desires of modern Western society. Women have become used and abused, especially in the pornographic industry and in prostitution and so on. So
you're talking about that from the perspective of commodification of women and based on society and what's happening with that.
Yes, and looking at this, Muslim scholars and sometimes Muslims more generally recoil from the advances that modern Western civilization has achieved in terms of women's rights, and they want to hold on to the original pristine pure Islam as they understand it to have come from the 7th century of Arabia. So they don't want any change in this regard. So there is a great need for us to not see a dichotomy between these two things, but again to see a third way, the third way being that we together with the modern world are all thinkers. We share a very common thinking base. There are so many advances in human thought that feed into all of our minds, whether we like it or not. And while our religion teaches us to take what is wholesome and good and to refuse what is foul and evil, we need to draw that distinction. Yes, we will resist what is foul and evil, but the advances in women's rights by themselves is not un-Islamic. In fact, it is very Islamic, and this is the very thing that Islam was doing. It is the very thing that the Qur'an was doing in the 7th century, advancing women's rights, but to the point that it could make a difference in the society at the time, rather than being merely theoretical. That would be entirely rejected at the time because it would seem so fantastic and incredible at the time.
So just to bring it back now to the idea of marriage, in what ways, for someone who might be thinking, well, Dr. Shabir, I don't know what you're talking about, in what ways are Muslim women disadvantaged in the current marriage system from an Islamic lens?
Well, there are several things, and we'll talk in more detail in other episodes about polygyny, which is an issue, and divorce, which is actually related to marriage. But looking at other issues, one of the issues is that there is no minimum age prescribed for an allowable Islamic marriage. So a boy or girl could get married very early. For a boy, this may not prove to be much of a problem because he always has the option of divorce. The woman did not have the option of divorce. She could seek a dissolution of her marriage, but that's a long process, and it requires taking her case to the Muslim court, or in a modern context where Muslims are minorities, maybe taking it to a council of imams or something like this. But for the boy, he can just simply utter the word divorce, and he's freed from a marriage that he does not like. So the woman can be quite disadvantaged in this situation. Now, we speak often about the consent of a woman in marriage, but that consent does not apply to minor girls. A girl could be married off by her father or her grandfather without her consent.
So this is an Islamic principle?
It is well known, and it is classified and codified in Islamic textbooks dealing with Islamic law.
From dating back previously, right? That this was
This
the
is very
case?
early, yes. Okay. And some will find even a Quranic indication of this. And in fact, it is not only in Muslim societies that girls got married early, but also in other societies as well in ancient times. Because nowadays we know about the pressures of modern life, not only girls, but boys as well. They have universities to attend, and typically by the time they're 25, they're done with university. Around that age, they start looking to get married. But in ancient times, people did not have all of these modern pressures, and their great contribution to societies would have been to get married, have children. They increased the number of the tribe. The tribe became larger and stronger. So each individual was contributing something to the growth of the tribe. And women in particular, that would have been a great contribution to their tribes by getting married early and having children. Also, people were mindful of their daughters in case their daughters might become pregnant outside of marriage. So a safe way, especially in honor and shame societies, was for them to get their girls married early, and that meant that whatever happened now with their daughters happened within a marriage, whether for good or bad, but it at least alleviated that aspect of shame from the family of a girl.
I think obviously there are a lot of issues, and I think I'm going to unilaterally decide that we need a second episode for this. But just as we wrap up, do you still think, in light of these brief issues that we talked about, and acknowledging that we'll probably need to have another episode where we talk more about the issues, that Islam still views women in a positive light, as we framed our initial discussion?
Well, yes, but here by Islam I mean my conception of what Islam is, involving the Quran as the basic teaching of Islam, understood against the backdrop of its historical circumstances and now reapplied to a modern and changing situation. So yes, this sees women in a positive light and will embrace many of the rights and responsibilities that are recognized for women in a modern context, so that the Muslim does not find himself or herself in this kind of cognitive dissonance between seeing what is right and thinking that Islam does not allow that. But if we're thinking that the classical view that Muslim scholars had about women, that this is equivalent to our modern concepts. No, that's wrong. The classical Muslim scholars did not see it this way, and they did not think that women have equal rights.
A wonderful, dramatic end to an interesting conversation. Thank you very much, Dr. Shapir.
You're welcome.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, a quick message from the team at Voice of Islam. Every time our show airs, we reach a potential audience in the hundreds of thousands. We bring the truth about Islam to non-Muslims and help Muslims learn more about their own faith. Every time something positive comes from Voice of Islam being on air, those people who have contributed and made the broadcast possible share in the potential rewards, inshallah. We really appreciate people donating what they can. Every little bit helps us meet the cost of broadcasting each week. We sincerely thank everyone who has helped us and continues to do so, and we look forward to more help in the future, inshallah. If you are keen to contribute, please visit our website for details of how to do so.
Ladies and gentlemen, Islam is the religion of the Creator. And that is why all the prophets were conveying one message: worship one God and disbelieve in all false gods. For more information, watch Voice of Islam.
When diseases and plagues spread, it's natural that people become scared. They're scared of death. In the Qur'an, Allah told us the story of the people who ran from their own village out of fear of death. The people in this village, when they heard that the plague was spread, they came together and they said, let's run, let's go to an area where there's no plague in order to be safe. Allah mentioned the story in Surah Al-Baqarah, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ خَرَجُوا مِن دِيَارِهِمْ وَهُمْ أُلُوفٌ حَذَرَ الْمَوْتِ. Have you not seen those who fled from their houses, وَهُمْ أُلُوفٌ, and their thousands, حَذَرَ الْمَوْتِ, fearing death. وَقَالَ لَهُمَ اللَّهُ مُوتُوا ثُمَّ أَحْيَاهُمْ. So Allah said to them, die, and then He brought them back to life. This village was a village from the people of Bani Israel, and as Allah described them in the Qur'an, that they were uluf. Some of the scholars mentioned they were 4,000, 8,000, some said 12 or 30 or 40 or 70. We don't know the exact number, but Allah mentioned that they're uluf, which means that they're going to be more than 10,000. Because in the Arabic language, uluf is going to be 10,000 and more, and alaf, for the thousands, is going to be less than 10,000. Allah wanted to teach them and those who come after them a lesson, that you cannot run from death. And we know from the teachings of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that if we are in a land that has been afflicted with the plague, that we're not allowed to leave that land. And if we hear of a land that has the plague, that we're not allowed to enter into that land. And that's why Umar ibn Khattab, when he was the Khalifa and he was traveling towards the Sham area, when he heard about the plague, he refused to enter into the city. Some of the Sahaba and those around him, they thought, what are you fearing? Are you fearing death? They said, are you running from the qadr of Allah? And he said, نَفِرُّ مِن قَدْرِ اللَّهِ إِلَىٰ قَدْرِ اللَّهِ. He said, we run from the qadr of Allah to the qadr of Allah, because Allah teaches us to take with the means. If we know there's a plague in the city, then we have to avoid it. Something interesting that the scholars of tafsir mentioned, when you reflect on this ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, the verse that comes right after it, it's the command from Allah to fight in the path of Allah. And when you fight in the path of Allah, what might happen? You might die. Allah wants to train us not to fear death. Wherever we're going to be and death is written for us, it's going to happen. Even if we're in burujim mushayyada and high lofty towers, if your death is written for you, it's going to catch you even there. The spread of such diseases and plagues, it reminds us of the reality of death. It becomes so widespread. And this is what Islam wants from us. Allah doesn't want us to fear death. He wants us to realize the reality of death and be prepared for it.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Terry Hall. I'm 24 years old and I was raised in Beach Haven in North Shore. I'm Māori Samoan and I come from a family, Catholics and Christians. I was raised on my Catholic side of the family, which was my Māori side with my mother, but I went to church with my grandmother who was very religious. Life as a child growing up, I guess I had a good life. So I got opportunities given to me, but it was hard being an only child and my parents being too busy all the time for me, so I was raised with my aunties. And as a teenager, things were easy, but they were also difficult at times as my parents were very strict. My stepfather was in the Navy and he had a lot of set rules, so I never got to experience the type of life a normal teenager would experience, like going partying and that, and yeah, I never got to experience that. I was just school, straight A student, it was just get my head in the books for a better life for myself. So at first I never really thought about changing my religion, as the religion I was brought up with was what I thought was right. And then one day my husband came home and he just said, "I'm a Muslim." And at first I was shocked because I did not know what to think. Like, I was thinking, so what does that mean for us? And I'm a Catholic, you're a Muslim, will it work out? And we got kids together. So I decided to learn more about Islam to see if maybe it could change my mind about religion. And I started learning more through the books and pamphlets that my husband brought home from the masjid. And then about maybe a month later after that, I decided to go to the masjid and see for myself what it was like, and I took my shahada and started my journey as a Muslim. So my journey as Muslim, so coming from a Catholic background to becoming a Muslim, it's been very hard for me. So journey-wise, it's been good for me so far. Like my husband, things were a bit rocky for me before becoming Muslim, and starting this journey has lifted me up, you could say, made me a happier person, opened my eyes to more opportunities, made me want to pursue things like a career and do better with myself, made me a better person than I thought I was. So when I took my shahada, I lost all my friends. I had friends that I was with friends for more than 18 years, and they cut me off as soon as I became Muslim. Even my family did. They reacted really badly to me being Muslim. They started so when I went to see my family, it just felt like I wasn't part of the family anymore because I wasn't doing things their way. My family are very tight together, like they all live down the road from each other. They like to stick together and raise all the kids together as Catholic children. And for me, I was kind of a rebellious one against my family. So when I moved out of the North Shore, away from them, I stopped talking to them because they didn't understand. They pretty much just, they pretty much just said, you know how you, So I always got this, whenever I went over, I always got these looks from them or the snide little remarks about my religion, and it made me feel uncomfortable, like just put me in a bad situation really, and I just felt like I didn't want to be around them because they were trying to tell me what was right and what was wrong, like Catholic's the right religion, you got to do kids, you got to name them Catholic names, all of that, and I just had enough. So I stopped talking to them and I pretty much cut everyone off because of the way they were making me feel. And yeah, I lost a lot of my friends, my family. I still love them. I do sometimes see them from time to time, but not as often as I would, because I'm afraid of what they will say to me. I'm a very emotional person, so I get really upset when they go and put down my religion or try to treat me like a child when I'm an adult. And a lot of that has to do with my mum being the youngest and her not being around anymore. Kind of gave my family the okay to be a parent to me. At first, I did really want to wear it. I learned about the reasons why women wear the hijab, and it made me want to wear it. But there are some times that I don't feel comfortable wearing it around my family. Like when I go to my family, I don't like wearing it because they always comment about why I wear that, why am I covering my beautiful hair, and I just feel very uncomfortable, so I don't wear it when I go to see my family. At times I do feel comfortable. Like, for example, when I attended uni, I felt comfortable wearing it, but when I'm around, like, for example, we live in Otara, and I want to go to the shops, I feel very uncomfortable because I get looks from everyone in my culture, and they always give me that, you know, their nose up, and they're like, oh, what is she wearing? I just feel judged. But in saying that, I do just hold my head up high and wear it, and proud to wear it. I believe it has changed my life for the better. So becoming Muslim gave me a sense of respect for myself as a woman. It has also taught me values that I can now teach my children than what I was raised on. I had this belief that how I was raised was the right way, and then becoming Muslim and learning about Islam showed me that a lot of things aren't, how would you put it, like the values and morals were different. And it's made me a better person. It's made me happier, and it's made me want to do more things that are halal rather than haram, because my life before was a lot of haram. And as I learned about Islam, it made me realize that I was doing a lot of wrong and not enough right. And becoming Muslim has made me live life the right way. I find that hard. I tend to live every day as a Muslim, but it's hard when I was raised differently culture-wise. So it's trying to incorporate culture into your religion and not just doing everything because that's what you're raised on, but try to incorporate your religion into your culture. And in a way, it is a good way for dawah, for your family to learn about Islam, as the way they see you change as a person. Even me dressing like this was a big shock to my family, because I never used to dress like this. Being completely honest, I was one of those women who like to walk around in singlets and that. And for me to wear something like this, I feel more highly about myself, I feel respected. I feel like people aren't looking at me like a piece of candy, pretty much. And I feel like no one can judge me because you can't see anything. You can only see my face, and you can't judge someone based on their face. So I understand how some of the sisters feel, not the way they change, the reverts. I understand. But in saying that, I feel good for myself. It's a good feeling, knowing that people can't talk about you based on anything about you when they can only see your face, and they just, it makes us, I believe it makes us more approachable. People want to know about you, they will approach you because they can't just judge you. So that's how I feel. Islam can offer a peaceful life. All the values that Islam teaches, I believe that it can benefit a lot of people if they just take the time, learn about it, and just put the effort and learn. That's all I can say. For them to live like that it's peaceful. It is really peaceful. All I can say is don't always listen to what the media has to say. Don't perceive Muslims of what is shown on TV, and go and learn about yourself. Even go meet a Muslim and see for yourself what kind of people they are. And don't think they're just terrorists because that's what people show.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
All of you are engaged in running your mouths, doing your business, multiplying, buying houses, cars, business, whatever you're doing. And when you're told about God, religion, life, morality, you're saying, look, I ain't got no time for that. I ain't got no time for that. Now, how do we know that there's a God? And how do we know that there's a creator?
God is the cause of all beings.
An atheist must believe that the universe came from nothing and by nothing. But surely that doesn't make sense. Out of nothing, nothing comes. So where did the universe come from? Why does the universe exist instead of just nothing? There must have been a cause which brought the universe into being. We can summarize our argument thus far as follows. Premise 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. 2, the universe began to exist. 3, therefore, the universe has a cause.
So this cause should be beyond space and time, eternal and self-existing necessary being. God is known through signs.
In the creations of the heavens and earth, and the alternation of the night and day, and the ships which sail the seas to people's benefit, and the water which Allah sends down from the sky, by which He brings the earth to life when it was dead, and scatters about in it creatures of every kind, and the varying directions of the winds, and the clouds subservient between heaven and earth. There are signs for people who use their intellect.
There are uniform laws in nature which indicate that nothing comes by coincidence. Everything is created precisely. And beside this perfect creation, there's a perfect sustaining system for each and everything that remain in a beautiful order rather collapsing. The miracle of life. Science has no explanation of where that life came from, or what causes the living body to die. They have no reason for dying of the people. If someone's heart has stopped working, replace it. Bring him back to life. You cannot control the people's life. You even don't know the reason of life or death. The reason of life and death is the one and only God. When there is no God, there would be no purpose for life. The sun is there to produce energy and light. The trees are there to produce oxygen and fruit. The animals are there to produce food and clothes. The question is that who set these purposes? Who told them to do this or that? What is the purpose of our life? For rational mind, everything has a purpose, and for sure there is a purpose for life, and there is a creator who set this purpose.
A human being, regardless of who they are, or where they are, or what they do, will have this curiosity. They'll want to know, why am I here? How did I get here? And do I have a purpose, and if so, what is it? The only one who would really be able to answer that question would be the Creator Himself. If there is a Creator, it would be up to Him to tell us why we were created and what He expects from us and what this life is really about. Allah has shown the people from the time of Adam until right now, has shown the people what He wants from them. And it's a very simple thing. and that is that worship be for Him alone without any partners. In fact, we know this life to be a test from Almighty God. That's why we're born, and that's why we die, because there has to be a beginning and an end for us to be tested on.
The miracles of Holy Qur'an. There are so many scientific miracles in Holy Qur'an from different branches of science, which all of them prove that Qur'an is the word of God.
There are more than 1,000 verses in the Quran which speak about science. After every scientific fact, you ask the question, who could have mentioned that in the Quran? The only reply the atheist can give you is the creator, the cherisher, the manufacturer, the inventor, the producer. This creator, this manufacturer, this producer, this inventor, we Muslims call him as Allah.
Look at what the Prophet ﷺ said. The most beloved actions to Allah is pleasure and happiness that you cause to enter the heart of a Muslim, or to solve one of his or her problems, or to pay off his or her debt, or to prevent him or her from being hungry. Now watch this. And working to help my Muslim brother or sister is more beloved to me. Now this is the Prophet ﷺ speaking. He says that working to help my Muslim brother or sister is more beloved to me than making i'tikaf, seclusion, in this masjid for a month. Do you see how powerful that is? And we need to mention that which masjid is the Prophet ﷺ standing in? Not this masjid. Masjid al-Nabawi.